Once upon a time, Atlantic City was the East Coast version of Las Vegas, a glitzy playground for gamblers, beachgoers, and anyone looking for a good time. The boardwalk was legendary, the casinos were making money, and it looked like the city had hit the jackpot. Fast forward a few decades, and Atlantic City is more of a cautionary tale than a success story. So what happened? How did a city that had everything going for it fall so hard? Well, grab your oversized novelty dice and let's roll through the reasons why Atlantic City tanked. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Back in the day, Atlantic City had a monopoly on East Coast gambling. If you wanted to hit the slots or play some blackjack without hopping on a plane to Las Vegas, this was the place to go. But as with all good things, that exclusivity didn't last long. Other states saw the money flowing into Atlantic City and thought, hey, we like money too. Enter casino gambling in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and yes, even New York. Suddenly, people didn't need to take a weekend trip to Atlantic City. They could just drive a few miles down the road to a casino in their own state. As more casinos popped up across the country, Atlantic City's local loyal visitors had plenty of other options. The result? Fewer tourists, less revenue, and a whole lot of empty hotel rooms. The biggest blow came from Pennsylvania, which legalized casino gambling in the mid-2000s. For years, busloads of gamblers from Philadelphia and surrounding areas had been making their trek to Atlantic City, filling up the casinos and pumping money into the local economy. But once Pennsylvania opened up those casinos, many of them conveniently located just outside of major cities, those same gamblers stopped coming to Atlantic City. Why travel hours away when you could lose your money closer to home? Then there's the Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun casinos in Connecticut. Those behemoths aren't just gambling destinations. They're full-on entertainment complexes with restaurants, concert venues, and shopping. Atlantic City, by comparison, started to look outdated. While the competition was evolving into full-fledged resorts, Atlantic City was still banking on the same old slot machines and buffet lines. And let's not forget New York. When the state introduced casinos, especially those just north of the city, it took away a huge chunk of Atlantic City's customer base. New Yorkers who once saw Atlantic City as a quick gambling getaway now had options that didn't require a 2-hour drive down the Garden State Parkway. The final dagger? The rise of online gambling and sports betting, which we have here in Oregon. You know, it's really weird. We could bet on sports, but we can't play fantasy leagues. It's really strange. With legalized gambling online in multiple states, many gamblers don't need to even leave their couches to place bets anymore. Why bother with a trip to Atlantic City when you can gamble from your phone while in your pajamas? All of this competition chipped away at Atlantic City's dominance. The city went from being the undisputed gambling capital of the East Coast to another option in a crowded market. And when you're no longer special, people start to forget about you. Back in the day, if you were serious about your career, you had to be in a major city. Wall Street for finance, Hollywood for entertainment, Silicon Valley for tech, and there was no other way. If you wanted to work in a specific industry, you had to physically be where the jobs were. The problem? Those places were, and still are, ridiculously expensive, crowded, and stressful. Sky-high rent, nightmare commutes, and an overall lower quality of life were just part of the deal. You weren't living in these places because you loved them, you were there because you had to be there. Then came the game changer, remote work. The pandemic just sped up what was already happening. People realized that they could do their jobs from literally anywhere as long as they had a good Wi-Fi signal. Suddenly, people that were crammed into shoebox apartments in New York City and San Francisco started asking, why am I paying $3,000 and $5,000 a month for this tiny apartment? And once they realized they didn't have to, they didn't. They packed up and left for places where they could afford a house, breathe fresh air, and not get honked at every 5 minutes. It wasn't just about escaping the cost of living. People started to see other perks too. No more 2-hour commutes on a packed subway. No more spending half your paycheck on rent and the other half on takeout food because your kitchen is the size of a porta potty. No more living in a city where stepping outside meant dealing with noise, pollution, and the constant stress of just existing. The freedom to work from anywhere gave people the chance to choose where they actually wanted to live, not where they had to live. And it's not just remote work that's making this shift possible. Companies are realizing that they don't need massive, overpriced buildings in major cities. They're downsizing, offering hybrid work models, and even going fully remote. I worked in an office for Comcast for a few years. They had a giant, like 5-story building on a tech campus. That's an empty building right now. Everyone went home and worked remotely. This means that even jobs that traditionally required an office presence, like marketing, design, finance, even tech, are now being done from small towns, the suburbs, or wherever people want to be. The reality is, the old rules of furthering your career and having a career kind of over. You don't have to live in the city. In my opinion, it's kind of good riddance. A one-trick pony might be entertaining for a while, but eventually you're going to want to see some new tricks. Atlantic City never learned that lesson. Instead of building a well-rounded economy, the city went all in on gambling. And that worked for a while. But when the industry started facing challenges like the Great Recession and the rise of online gambling, Atlantic City didn't have a backup plan. At first, the strategy seemed foolproof. When New Jersey legalized gambling in the 1970s, Atlantic City quickly transformed into the East Coast's premier gambling destination. The money poured in. High-rise casinos sprang up, and the city enjoyed the golden era of prosperity. But instead of using that success to build a more diverse economy, Atlantic City let itself become utterly dependent on gambling. Meanwhile, other gambling hubs like Las Vegas saw the writing on the wall. Vegas knew it couldn't survive on slot machines and poker tables alone, so it started branching out. It became a global entertainment capital, investing in high-end dining, luxury shops, world-class shows, and major conventions. Atlantic City, on the other hand, just kept slapping new coats of paint on aging casinos and pretended everything was fine. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, Atlantic City got wrecked. People weren't spending money like they used to, and tourism dropped sharply. The city, with no other major industries to fall back on, felt the impact hard. The casinos that once had been Atlantic City's lifeline started shuttering their doors, and the city's revenue collapsed. Instead of pivoting, Atlantic City doubled down on gambling, hoping for a miracle. That miracle never came. More casinos closed, the unemployment soared, and the city became a shell of its former self. The lesson: if you're going to stake your entire future on one industry, make sure it's one that can survive change. Corruption. The cherry on top of every struggling city's woes. Atlantic City has had its fair share of scandals, mismanagements, and of course, questionable decisions. When the city is dealing with a financial disaster, the last thing it needs is a reputation for corruption, scaring off potential investors. But that's exactly what happened. Over the years, Atlantic City has seen a parade of officials who seemed more interested in lining their pockets than fixing the city's problems. From bribery scandals to outright embezzlement, the city has been plagued by leaders who made bad situations far worse. Instead of tackling the mountain of economic and social issues, many of those in power were busy making deals that benefited themselves rather than the residents of the city. The reputation for corruption didn't just hurt Atlantic City politically, it scared off businesses and investors who may have been willing to help the city diversify. Why invest in a place where mismanagement is the norm? Why take the risk when you know your project might get tangled in bureaucratic incompetence or worse, a scandal? As a result, much-needed development stalled, and Atlantic City remains stuck in a downward spiral. Some attempts at reform have been made, but the damage was already done. Years of corruption left the city in financial disarray, and even when new leadership tried to step in, it was often too little and too late. The city's reputation for being a political and financial mess became harder to shake, ensuring that even when opportunities for revitalization rose, they often fizzled out before making any real impact. It's hard enough for a city to recover from economic collapse, but when you add political corruption to the mix, it's like trying to swim while holding a bag of bricks. As Atlantic City's economy declined, so did the population. Many of the middle-class residents packed up and left, taking their tax dollars with them. When your city's already struggling, losing a large chunk of your tax base is like taking a hit to the kneecaps. The city had fewer resources to invest in infrastructure, schools, and public services, making it even less attractive for new residents and businesses. Now, this sort of happens whenever a city hits hard times. As the city declines, people start leaving, businesses start leaving, which means less money coming in, which in turn means it's harder to fix the situation, because you need money for that. Atlantic City isn't dead yet, but let's just say it's been on life support for a while. The city has tried to reinvent itself with new attractions, investments, and a push to become a more well-rounded destination. Some casinos have made a slight comeback, and there has even been an effort to bring back more non-gambling related entertainment. But will it be enough? Is it too late? Only time will tell if Atlantic City can bounce back or if it's just delaying the inevitable. If there's one lesson to take away from all this, it's putting all your chips on one bet, whether it's gambling, real estate, or a single industry. It's a risky move. Diversification isn't just a smart strategy in investing, it's key to survival for any city. So if you find yourself strolling down Atlantic City's boardwalk, just remember, you're walking through the remnants of what was once a high-rolling empire that gambled too hard and lost big. Let's hope they can find their way back before the house wins for good. Alright, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, you probably enjoy one of the two videos being suggested right now. Have a great day. Be nice to each other.